time for our plate of the day. So, capitalizing and crippling the coochie. How advertising has defined standards for women through product advertisements. So, first of all, we know that gender norms are a thing. We know that advertising media, blah, 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 informs a lot of the opinions as to why things are the way they are, even down to this concept of getting a wedding ring and being proposed to in a certain way was a marketing scheme. Ooh. The idea that blue is for boys and pink is for girls was a marketing scheme. That. Like all of this, we know marketing plays a heavy hand in how we are socialized. It is fact. It is written in books, right? So I've always been that bitch who even growing up would watch commercials. First of all, the thing I would notice the most was how none of the women looked like me and they were all white women. And even when it was on Univision and shit, I'd be like, yeah, a white woman. That's still a white woman. But the way in which not only are they prescriptive in terms of what the women look like, but they're prescriptive on how you should be indulging and experiencing these products, right? And it's still framed so this idea that it's if I'm showering with herbal essences, I feel like a powerful blah blah blah, and it's just the way that you should be experiencing this is the same. And I remember, and the reason I use herbal essences as an example is because I remember when I would fight with my mom, why can't I use that? Why can't I use that? Why can't I use that? Because she would often buy productos from DR and stuff like that for my hair.
Because of sulfate,
right? And I didn't know any of that shit. And that's before I was woke with my hair. I was still getting my blowouts and shit. And because in my head I'm when I get my blowouts at the end and this happens, that can happen on my head, but I didn't understand my hair and the roots of my hair, and I into this age is when I've seen my hair look like this. So in my head, when these products would get used and people would be like, "Ah, no, eso no sirve para tu cabello," I'd be like, "Why? Because I'm black? That's weird. Why can't I have this flowy experience?" And the detangling is never. It was always. You know what I mean? And I'm why is the product telling me how this experience should be? And then when I don't have that experience, I set myself up for disappointment. I judge myself. I feel like I am not the archetype of a woman and what women are desired to be, because even through the use of your product, I don't even have that right. In addition to all of these other norms and all of these other things that people put upon us. So, that's how I came up with the plan of the day today, was really meditating on some of that. And Kat, you've done some work around thinking about products that are advertised towards women and how we can reshape some of these narratives. Can you give us a little insight on the project you worked on recently?
I think what you are trying to get to is most recently, even though for a really long time people have called me an influencer, I just recently, for the first time ever, signed my first quote-unquote influencer contract, and that was with You by Kotex. And for my first assignment with them, they gave me a lot of liberty. I don't just say yes to a lot of contracts or folks who want to work with me, because I take in consideration the audience that I have built, the voice that is important to me, the issues that are important to me. And when you deal with brands, it's kind of difficult because it gets problematic.
Right.
Wow, my voice went very high for that.
Is that problematic? Is that problematic?
But I did work with You by Kotex years ago, and they approached me yet again. And what appealed to me was the liberty, the creative liberty. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to share this story that one of the first assignments that I did for them, for me, what I did was make a video entitled 3 Periods. And how I constructed this video was a lot of B-roll, aka no one's really talking into camera. It's just voiceover. I recorded conversations with my grandmother and then my mother. My grandmother on my mother's side, about, their introduction to their periods, when they got their period, what their their mother said to them, what it felt like. And I used lots of insert shots, kind of reenacting those moments. And, I used faux blood in these reenactments, and I showed Kotex this video, and unfortunately, due to I guess their brand guides, they rejected that video because they wanted the faux blood to be extracted from that video.
Right, because even in the ads we usually see, they pour a cup
blue.
of water.
Blue. Yeah.
The blue.
It's still,
which you know, for years I didn't realize that in those commercials the blue was supposed to be blood.
Yeah.
Like I never realized that until my adult years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, that was a weird experience because they specifically reached out to me and contracted me in order to call out the taboos, right? And part of the taboo is seeing the blood, you know, like normalizing the fact that like women bleed.
Right.
And that's just what happens.
Right.
And so that video actually didn't fit into the quota of me being an influencer, and I just posted that as like independently posting it, and it did really well in terms of views. I forget how many views it got, specifically like on IG. Oh, I'm looking right now, like 139,000 views on IG, but due to their criteria and due to how much further they have to grow as a brand, they rejected that. I forget what you asked me. But
No. Yeah, just the experience. I just want to hear about the experience of that, because clearly your campaign was coming from a place of the true experience that you were having as a woman who uses this product.
But I want to emphasize, like that video, 3 periods, kind of drew people on the journey of my grandmother who grew up in Colombia. She went to a nunnery as a school. I forget what the exact term is. And so she was very shamed when it came to her period. Like you were not supposed to talk about your period at all. You were very siloed. And then of course my grandmother passed that on to my mom.
Right.
And then my mom, as being one of 7 or one of 5 women in her, as her siblings, she found it really weird. And so she took it upon herself to, when then she had both me and my sister, to be like, no, fuck this. Like, I'm going to teach my daughters something different. And so I grew up with a mother who, like, from day one was like, she brought me into the bathroom, and I saw my mom as she had her period, like throw out her pad. My mom didn't use tampons.
Right.
Throw out her pad, and like my mom tells me stories of how when I was little, I would be like, I want to wear a pad. And so before I even had my period, I would walk around with like a huge bulge.
That's hilarious.
That's a whole nother combo. Like a bulge in my pants, wearing like an adult size pad. And so that's what the video that I made was, kind of encompassing how like the stigma around menstruation kind of lessened with each generation, allowing us to be more free and more accepting of our menstruation.
Yeah, no, and I remember when I saw the video, I fucking loved it, and I shared it. I think I shared it a few times actually, because I was like, yes, this is the story. My period story was very different, where my mom was very uncomfortable talking about these things but my mom was an orphan by the age of 13. Like, she did not grow up with her mother being the one who like taught her, because her mother died before her father. So I forget how young she was when her mom died, but she was pre-menstruation age, right? So like for her, navigating that space was very awkward. And so when she got that paper from school that was like, oh, can your child participate in sex education class stuff? At first she was like, no. And then she was kind of like, actually, I don't want to do this shit myself. You know what I mean? So I know. So I learned my like sort of like, puberty education through a program in school, but it was very technical, and I remember thinking like, when I get my period, it's going to flow out of me like what I saw in the commercials. Like, so the same rate at which the cup is releasing that blue liquid. I thought that periods meant that I was going to be like an open faucet of blood, like just like, you know what I mean? Just like, and I think that's important to note, just to say that, like, especially as a woman, like even though I was a young woman and I wasn't at that point in my life yet when I was watching those ads, I was digesting the standard of like what my experience was going to be moving forward. And so, and I'll add on again, and when I'm not seeing people of color color, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when, as a woman of color, I have a different experience, and this is not so much with pads, and now we're talking about hair or makeup and things like that. When I don't have the same experience as the person I saw in the ad, I start to then feel less than because I don't match what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like if this product is magic, the magic don't work on me because I'm black, and you know.
And that's what I went to school for advertisement. I actually went to FIT and studied advertising and marketing communications because I thought that was the way I was going to change media. And so that is honestly the way they teach you. It's like an open blanket way generalization of how to market to people, right? So when it comes to periods, it's like general is like PMS. Oh my God, this sucks. We use white women. We use this. And I told you prior to recording, it's like I actually never experienced PMS. So I felt really, really, really outside of like the general consensus of like how women feel when they're on their periods. And now that I'm almost 30, I researched, and most recently I've been feeling the feelings of like general PMSing, right? So of like mood swings, of like crying, of like depression, of having cravings and being like, wait, what the hell is this? You know, like why is this happening now? I'm almost 30. You know, what is going on? And really, like, do advertisements tell you that like PMS can also spike and change from when you hit puberty and when you're 30? No, they don't tell you that.
Right.
Absolutely not. They use a very blanket statement of what your menstruation looks like, you know? And when you do that, you ostracize people and you make people feel bad. And you can, and that's used in advertisement of Latinidad, you know, like if you don't fit into this general blanket statement of fitting into quote unquote Latinidad, of being like light skinned, kind of ambiguous, caramel, dique brown, you know, then you don't fit into it, and then people question who you are and why you don't look like them. And that fits into all forms of advertisement, whether that's menstruation, whether that's like, you know, ethnic marketing, etc., etc.
And then it doesn't allow you to know that some of the products we're consuming as women, it's because it's a response to something that maybe is a little gross. And maybe it's like, I think of deodorant commercials, and I think like how there's always like butterflies and shit popping out the bitch's armpit when she's putting the thing on, and it's just like, oh, okay, so like that's what it is. Then the opposite of what I guess smelly and man-like is butterflies and flowers popping out of my armpits.
Do you remember? Do you remember when Secret slogan was "Strong enough for a man, made for a woman"?
Yeah.
I, for some reason, throughout this entire and even the idea of like having this conversation, that was the first thing that popped into my head. Like having that ad where it was like, and I remember the ads were always like these men in a gym and they're all sweating, and it was this ad for deodorant that was catered towards women. And obviously they've changed that nowadays, but
but also like, okay, I think of, sorry, no, finish your thought.
No, I think that was done to me.
And I think of Degree, or well, Old Spice has gone the comedy route, like, but before they weren't necessarily like comedic. But when I think of like, what was Degree? Is that the one that it is? I'm looking at the logo. Anyway, I think it's Degree. So, and it's just like, it would be guys like pumping iron. And then it was like dark background, and then like, you know, close up of the arms, close up of the thing, and it'd be like, men, stay fresh with Degree, and it was like this like powerful, like, you know what I mean? And I'd watch that, but like, where's the ad of a Serena Williams on the court? You know, like that same energy is real, right? Like, fuck it. Let me say something. Sometimes when we a little bigger, we sweat a little more. Sometimes the experience don't need to be you on a tennis court. It can be you running for the bus.
Secret. What they're not advertising is how Secret and Dove and all these deodorants are great for chafing thighs. You put that shit in between your legs.
Thighs. Like, you know what? We have an issue where, as someone who started a YouTube channel and who really like, you know, took on social media in order to combat the norms of traditional media, we now see social media influencers take on the traditional, really oppressive, toxic behaviors of traditional media. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is then people like myself who, you know, have a big following on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, or what have you, or YouTube, you know, are given opportunities to advertise certain products. Well, then you don't really advertise them in a way that's realistic, you know, that like, you know, what have you, have a deodorant, as you said, you know, and be like, well, you know, like I really sweat sometimes, and actually I don't use my deodorant just in my armpits. I use it also on my thighs. What you see is a lot of like people advertise and mimic traditional advertisements, right? So it's just like, hey, me smiling at the beach. Oh my God, use the deodorant. Hashtag, you know, self-love.
Yep.
And
use the deodorant, self-love.
I will say, you know, I was really hesitant when I was approached by Kotex to come on board as a influencer. One, because folks had been calling me an influencer for a really long time, and I hadn't actually signed any contract that considered me as an influencer. And secondly, because I didn't want to be forced to create content by anyone's means, you know, anyone's direction. I have been making a name for myself under my own guidelines. And so what appealed to me by Kotex was they were like, no, we want you to do exactly what you do. Of course, there's always a compromise there. But for the most part, I was able to do whatever I wanted to do, you know? So I was able to make an entire, like, literally 4 photo shoot being like, this is what women do on their period. We are still really active on our period. We play soccer and make it very, like, avant-garde. I was able to challenge myself as a producer and produce, like, a 4-part photo series. I was also able to use the pronouns they and make sure that, like, when it comes to periods, it's not just she. I know there were a couple of people who came onto my Instagram and asked me, you know, this is a little bit transphobic because you are not including trans women who don't have their period or men who still menstruate. But at the end of the day, I was only able to use myself as a subject. That was in my contract. That's why they contracted me, was to use myself as a subject. But I made sure that the pronouns I used were not just specific to women, right? Because I acknowledge that there are men who still menstruate. And so I think small little victories like that are really important.
Absolutely. And it's just like, you know, I think one of the big takeaways here is just like there's a way in which we have been conditioned, and there's certain like products and ways in which I view products that are geared towards women, and I still find myself thinking, oh, well, do I fit into that box? So is that product for me? And recently for me, it's been more about hair products. And like even in this curly hair space, I've always lived in a weird space of like, I'm not super girly, but I'm not a tomboy either. You know what I mean? So like if you're advertising too sporty and too whatever, that like, I'm like, oh, that's dope. I can't run like that bitch. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm not that bitch. But then I see, and then, you know, a lot of it is like the products are being represented by the women who are creating the products, which is awesome. And I'm like, wow, and I'm nothing like these women. So when I'm looking at the advertising and stuff, I'm like, you know, obviously I'm old enough to decipher like, oh, this is a product and it's a good product, so I'm going to use it despite how it's advertised. But like sometimes when you're in spaces or events and you're seeing the activations around, and I think of it because when we go to conferences like YouTube's conference or Hispanicize, and they have booths, right? And you're like in the face of how this brand is choosing to present itself outside of my screen. I feel weird. I feel like even in like taking like whatever post pictures and whatever step and repeat thing they have, I feel like I don't even fit that mold. So like, I can skip that picture, or I'll only do it because Skittles is like, no, this is good for content. And I'm like, okay, you're right, because it's good for content. But like, I don't feel like I'm this girl. I'm not the poster child, essentially, is what I'm saying. And so there are ways in which I still buy into the fact that I'm not the poster child, but there are some brands who are trying. I don't know that anyone has gotten it perfect, but I remember when Dove did that beauty campaign, and it was like, okay, so rather than, and this is what I mean, like now commercials want to be making whole movies for their shit. Great. So now don't sell me the bullshit of like you needed to stay within certain frames, because if you can have a whole military story be a car commercial, let's say, for example, like then why can't we dig into these topics in a certain way? And Dove did this lightly when they did a campaign years ago where they asked people to describe themselves and had an artist like draw them, and they looked really ugly, but then they had people who knew them describe them, and the picture looked so much like drastically different, and that campaign to me was so powerful, because as I was seeing the people describe themselves, I was like, how would I describe myself? And I started to be like, wow, bitch, your shit would be real ugly if you did this. And it taught me something. And it's like, I happen to not use Dove soap because I like natural soaps and, oils and shit like that. But I respect the brand, but there's a respect for the brand. You know what I mean? And there's an engagement of that brand where I don't throw shade to Dove, and I don't shade people for throwing Dove. And not that I shade people for using other products, unless it's like Chick-fil-A, and this is now food industry. Unless it's like something that is very clearly problematic and you're still engaging it. But like, yeah, I don't know. I just think like I think about these things a lot because I still am in the process of discovering the kind of woman I define myself as. Like, yes, I know I'm straight. Yes, I like to think I'm powerful. Yes, I'm black as fuck. Yes, I'm Latinx as fuck. But like, what else is like? But like, what does that mean about who I am? Like, what are my behaviors? What are my tendencies? What are the things I care about? Like, and advertising has played such a role in the way in which I feel I can or cannot express that. So I just thought it was important to dig into the topic.
Yeah,
and I think everything is an advertisement,
right?
I think some people fool themselves into being like, I am not a brand,
right?
And
right.
I even use that terminology of like, I haven't, I'm not a brand, but in itself, I know that I am,
right?
That people reach out to me for a specific type of voice, for a specific type of energy. People are going to reach out to y'all for a specific type of energy, and that in itself is a brand. And so respecting, like you said, like you respect that Dove advertisement that spoke truth, to a certain degree of like what beauty standards are, and kind of highlighted that and allowed other people to see themselves in that.
Right. Absolutely. That's what happens after you eat a bite of yogurt. Activia. Because that's how I take a shit on the toilet when I eat yogurt that's supposed to help me shit.
Oh my
goodness. Yeah. Well,
what are some, like, I just like, as a one last little thing, what are some like super ridiculous ads that you can remember right now? I know I mentioned the made for a man or made for a woman. You know what the fuck I just said.
I mean, I think some of the ridiculous ones have been definitely, I don't want to open up a new can of conversation. I'm excited to see how you all edit this. Are a lot of advertisements that are shown during Super Bowl.
Yes.
Because Super Bowl is a time where advertisers understand the eyeballs, right? Mm-hmm. It is a time for millions of people who are watching. And so folks capitalize on that. So you have brands like Carl's Jr. hop on board and sexualize a hamburger and have like Kim Kardashian or Kate Upton.
Oh my God! Remember GoDaddy when GoDaddy first came out, and it was all sexy women,
and
I was
just
like,
hypersexualization of women. It wasn't actually necessarily hypersexualization of women of color, but just like women in general, which obviously trickles to women of color. And then I think that's ridiculous. It's like, why the fuck would a hamburger be so sexy?
Right.
Or like the super sensitive Google ad that they had up this year. There was like this like ad that we were watching this year.
There was a sad one.
And it was
really
about
memories, and like I think wasn't it something about Alzheimer, and they like went that route of like memories and like how we capture memories. I liked that commercial.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't see any of the advertisements. I was just very
waiting for J-Lo.
I was very appalled at the representation of quote unquote Latinidad.
Yeah.
But that's another combo.
No, quick tidbit. So after having watched it before, because I felt that way very strongly beforehand, and only ended up actually watching it because my brother, who lives across the street, was already having it on, and Skittles was over, and I was like, all right, well, actually, we went there to eat.
We went there for the food.
Sorry, family, I didn't go there to see you. I actually went there because we were hungry, and so I went and I ate, and obviously it was on, so we watched it, and like, I was surprised to see that so many black dancers and stuff were incorporated. I was disappointed that in seeing that they took the area of opportunity to bring other talent on the stage, like Bad Bunny and stuff like that we didn't. And even there was one of the songs, and I can't remember the name because I'm a reggaeton fan, but I'm bad with names of songs and which artists. But there was a song where it was like, I think you were J Balvin or when Bad Bunny was out, that there's another reggaeton artist of color who's on that same song. And like, you know what I mean? I just wanted to see more people of color, but I saw a lot of people of color on the stage, which surprised me. And I feel like they took some nuances to try to highlight to certain issues. Is it sufficient? That's arguable, but I was glad that it wasn't completely dismissive, was how I walked away from it.
Yeah. I was personally, Super Bowl, as someone who has studied advertisement, and in particular the eyeballs that are involved in the Super Bowl halftime show and the advertisements, I was really, really surprised at how many folks were complicit in celebrating the representation of quote unquote Latinidad, with like J-Lo, J Balvin, Shakira, and Bad Bunny. And what I mean by that is that, like, yes, of course you can enjoy the entertainment value. As a Colombian, I was like, yes, Shakira. You know what I mean? Like, so I enjoyed it from an entertainment value, but I also recognize the ways in which on a larger scale and so many millions of people watching, this is what they see as representing quote unquote Latinidad. And so when you say things like, hashtag Latino gang, which is a term that's used to quote unquote unify us, is it actually unifying us if folks are being erased in that representation, right? So for example, we have, in the Super Bowl halftime show, a big concentration was reggaeton. So like, where is the black representation, like Ozuna, you know, like the traditional...
I think it was Ozuna who was on the song, because I remember my niece, it was my 5-year-old niece who asked about the black artist, and I was like, oh shit, this song has a black reggaetonero. Yeah. Sorry,
and
continue.
I don't want to focus a lot on the celebrity factor of like what J-Lo should have done, what Shakira should have done. It's more on, I want to push folks who viewed the halftime show and who had no criticism of the halftime show. Because I think folks like myself who are not black, who fit into the model minority Latino representation of being like this like ambiguous non-black person, we celebrate that because it brings us joy. And so are we upholding anti-blackness because we prioritize our joy before the uncomfortability or the erasure of black folks? And so I felt like the halftime show was a missed opportunity for folks like J-Lo and folks like Shakira they're like, I don't know, someone please call me out, but I don't have the statistics, but are they not in like the 1%? They're in this celebrity factor where they could have advocated for other folks to come on board, to take up space.
Here's where that was one of my immediate wonderment, not even specifically to them, but like how the show gets produced altogether. And there was an article that talks about how, like, first of all, they don't get paid. They're there voluntarily, and the accolade is like, oh, I can say that I did the halftime show. It is produced by the NFL. and they like, you know what I mean? And so I only say that to say that doesn't mean that their star power isn't enough that they can demand shit. I agree with that. But I just, even like ourselves sometimes when we're working on shit, and similar to what you were saying about the ads of like, oh yeah, like it had to be about me because contractually that's what it was. So I couldn't have a trans person, you know, featured. So I wonder what the logistics of that are. But I also, with both of them, like, and I don't want to bog down on the celebrity factor, but just because they both have made music with black people, like, you know what I mean? Like, even if they were like, oh, we have to stay in our catalog, but let's be intentional about, like, you know, like, let Wyclef Jean come on stage. Let, you know. And they're already star power, and it's hard, right? Because it's tricky. And I also think, just to say, because this conversation is so hard, and like, two things can be true at once. Like you said, it is true that could be a moment of pride, and the performance, like actually like the performance itself was a great performance, and like all that stuff can be true. And people trying to explore this conversation around blackness is not one that's egregious, and like to say that the talent that every person on that stage displayed, not just the celebrities, was of no value. It was of complete value, right? But in a larger NFL argument, and I'll even move away from this, like, you know, black Latinos, my thing was like, even participating in the first place was an erasure of the black people who have been fighting really hard to hold this organization accountable in the first place. You know what I mean?
I want to make it as accessible to people, and when I mean people, I mean non-black people, non-black Latinx people, non-black Latino people, that like maybe you don't know the politics of how J-Lo and Shakira came to accept performing at the halftime show. You don't know the fact that like several other black celebrities have turned it down, like Cardi B, like Rihanna. I was gonna be like Rihanna. Like Rihanna turned it down. I don't even want to get into that. I just want to get into the fact of like, how did we consume it? When you saw J-Lo and when you saw Shakira take to the stage, and when you saw J Balvin and when you saw Bad Bunny take to the stage, how did you consume it? Right. You have to understand that this stage speaks volumes. Right. People pay millions of dollars to advertise during this. Yeah, close to billions. Yeah. Close to billions to advertise during this show because they realize the eyeballs that are associated to this show. Yeah. And so when you see quote unquote Latino people being represented, and when it doesn't include any black people, what does that mean? You know? And when you say that hashtag Latino gang means unification of us, what does it mean when black folks don't feel unified by the current state of our representation? Right. So if you feel that we are unified, but you hear that people are not unified by this, what are you going to do to ensure that we are unified? Yes. And that doesn't mean that you cannot enjoy entertainment. Exactly. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy the artistry that is, you know, J Balvin, that is Bad Bunny, that is J-Lo, that is Shakira. It doesn't mean that you should be shamed to enjoy the artistry. Right. It just means be a little more critical and ask for more. Yes. Woo, beautiful note. Yeah. Beautiful note to end on. Kat, thank you so much for being with us today. Any shout outs? Where can we find you? You can find me on all platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, etc., all under the same handle, which is It's Kat Lasso. Awesome, awesome. Skittles, where can they find us?
Well, you guys can find us at Ladies Who Brunch on Instagram, Ladies Who Brunch on YouTube, Ladies Brunch on Twitter, and on all your favorite streaming platforms. Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And until next time, bronche. Bronche. Bronche, bronche. That's how we say brunch. Here's to the ladies who say this with their